Today we're in Roxbury, Connecticut, a quiet, nearly untouched corner of Litchfield County, where rolling hills and protected woodlands have long drawn artists, writers, and dreamers seeking space to create.
This is gouache on paper by Donald Bachelor, and it was something I bought from an art dealer friend in the late 1980s when I first moved to New York City. And I paid him $100 a month for 7 months to get this work. What's interesting about this is that Donald Bachelor's work is always kind of these primitive elements, and so it says Donald, so we'll take it as a self-portrait, but beneath that, you can maybe sort of see it. There's something that they call pentimento, which is when an artist changes their mind and paints something over it later. And what the pentimento is in this case, it's actually his father. So there's something about the father-son relationship there, which I think is quite remarkable.
Here, designer Glenn Gissler has restored an 1840 Greek Revival farmhouse with a deep reverence for history, art, and architecture. Recently listed on the National Register of Historic Places, the house stands as a living testament to preservation, imagination, and the enduring dialogue between art and design.
At one point in January 1945, David and Jacqueline, I think, went to Arizona for 9 months. And during that time period, they loaned the house to Arshil Gorky. When I first found this out, I couldn't believe it. I said, this is crazy. And so Arshil Gorky lived in this house for 9 months, from January to September 1945. And many of the, there are many books on Arshil Gorky, and I've been able to trace artworks that would have been created out in the studio building.
To watch Glenn's full episode ad-free and to see more of his research lab and art collection, scan the QR code on screen or click the join button below. You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. I'm Allison Kenworthy, the founder of Homeworthy, and we take you inside the world's most beautifully decorated homes and introduce you to the brilliant people who live there.
Hi Homeworthy, I'm Liz Lang. Welcome to Grey Gardens.
Click the join button below to access all of our latest episodes ad-free and watch extended cuts of this and other homes, opening the doors to new rooms and exclusive content featuring our beloved hosts.
I can't wait to see, I'm so excited.
And if you're looking to shop items inspired by this and other Homeworthy tastemakers, be sure to use the product links below or scan the QR code on screen to find fabulous furniture, coffee table books, and accessories that can transform your house into a home.
Hello, Homeworthy. My name's Glenn Gissler. I'm really excited to show you my antique house in Roxbury, Connecticut. Come on in. Hello, Homeworthy. My name's Glenn Gissler. I'm an interior designer based in New York City, and I want to welcome you to my house in Roxbury, Connecticut. This is the first house that I've ever owned on my own. It is at this point 185 years old, and I didn't fully understand what that meant. I loved all of the existing architecture, the wide plank floors, the layout of the rooms, the baluster on the stairs, the facade of the house, but I didn't fully understand what it was to take care of a really old house. And so I've done the most to do the least, which is to preserve what's here, but to fortify the infrastructure and enhance the experience of being in the house. Interior design at its best is really a kind of portraiture of the people whose home we're designing. It's challenging to do a self-portrait. I don't necessarily have the same level of objectivity, but at the same time, it's a process of becoming. That is, my interests in art and architecture and cultural history all become manifest in this house. I've been collecting art and objects for decades, and recombining, editing, and eventually it becomes more and more a self-portrait of myself at this point in my life. It reflects my values and my interest in art and my interest in including lots of people in my life. That is, the house is big enough that I can accommodate house guests. I've also got a very big dining table so I can serve dinners for 6, 8, or 10 people. And I've got multiple places to serve meals, and I love to have people around. The house is a kind of vessel waiting to be activated by my guests. Welcome to the entry foyer of my house. I prefer that people really use the front door of my house as opposed to spilling into the kitchen. I'd like to say hello to my guests, have enough room to give them a hug and welcome them into my house, and this is the space that we do that. The room is as it was, but I've added some artwork into the space. There's a drawing over here by Wilfred Zogbaum, who's an abstract expressionist sculptor. This is from 1955. And this is a collage by Conrad Marcarelli from 1970. The curious chairs here are actually from 1820. They're English hall chairs, but they have a kind of geometric edge to them that give them much more of a kind of modern sensibility. The pedestal here is a Biedermeier pedestal. And then I've collected locally some bittersweet that are spilling out of this big Chinese pot. The rug in here is a cotton hooked rug, which would have been the kind of rug that would have been in a house like this. And it is a rug I designed in what's called falling block pattern, which you might have seen in classical architecture in Italy or Greece. So it's got kind of classical overtones to it. These are the original stairs that were here. I painted them a dark brown. They had been painted many colors before, but I wanted the architecture to stand out well. And then going up the stair, there are some pictures. There's a 1940s anonymous painting in its original frame, which has a kind of Noguchi lamp in it, and beneath that is an African mask. It sets the tone of a kind of art-filled house. And if you'll follow me, I'll take you into the library. So this room would be really considered a kind of proper parlor. This is where you'd greet your guests in the 19th century. It would have been the sort of most formal room in the house. And it still is to some extent, although I keep a fairly low-key vibe in the house. It's a curious room. I keep art and design books about colonial architecture, mid-century art and furniture, and decorative arts. The ceiling has a wallpaper from Farrow and Ball, which has got gilded bumblebees across it. And particularly at night, with candles lit, it gives a kind of shimmery atmosphere to the room. There's many things in this house by a furniture designer named Robs John Gibbings. Robs John Gibbings did a book in the 60s called Furniture of Classical Greece. And what he did is he went and he looked at the black pots that we've seen in museums and recreated furniture based on those designs. And so and over here we have a pair of klizmos chairs, which are really sort of based on this ancient Greek form that you see on the front of the book. The coffee table is also by him, which has its classical forms to it, but that was part of a collection he did for Whitcomb around 1950. And the sofa is also designed by him. It's actually unusual to find fully upholstered works by T.H. Robs John Gibbings. And this, I've got an antique Cezanne textile on it and some crushed velvet pillows. Tempietto, which sits on a marble pedestal behind the sofa, I found at a yard sale on Shelter Island. It was $10. It's one of those things that I walked in and I saw it. I didn't even care what the price was, but it was $10, and I really love how it has strong classical bones, and yet it's kind of handmade and has, it's just a simple painted wood structure. I haven't done anything to restore it or paint it and make it any fancier. On the walls in here, most of the artwork is really text-based. This is a text work by the artist Kenny Goldsmith, who I went to school with at Rhode Island School of Design. And you see that there's one layer on the front of words, and on the back there's another layer, and so that it becomes a kind of graphic element. Over here, this is a drawing by my daughter when I think she was 10, and it's also got text in it, and it's the silhouette of the Statue of Liberty. And below that is I guess back when they used to actually teach cursive, this is a early 19th century a practice sheet, and it says harmonious, 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 harmonious. Over here, there's a couple more text works. There's this one on the top is actually by my older brother, Gary, who's a psychoanalyst and an artist. And believe it or not, this is a hand transcribed every word from a chapter from Moby Dick, where he wrote it over and over and over again. So it becomes a kind of abstract, becomes an abstract shape. And then this is another text work. This is, I think, in Arabic by a poet with the last name Jallar. The lamp here I got from a dealer in Stockholm. Weighs a lot. It's ceramic, but has the kind of pock marks of the moon. The other thing that's in this room is a collection of things by an early English industrial designer named Sir Christopher Dresser. He worked in ceramics. This is something he did in ceramics. It's a curious kind of object. He also designed this teapot in 1879, which looks kind of Bauhaus in its kind of modernity. There's terracotta works that are up here. These are flower frogs, ceramics. I have quite a few of his things. There's some over here. These are called fire dogs, and these would sit in front of your fireplace on the hearth, and your equipment would sit across it. So these are early 19th. So this is 19th century industrial design. Some of the things are really quite extraordinary. These are also by Christopher Dresser. The other thing that we have in this room is an artwork by a neighbor, which was Alexander Calder. His house is about a mile or so from here. He was a young artist at the time and bought an 18th century house, and this is a work by Alexander Calder. This is a 1830s Biedermeier cabinet. I use it for my drinks table. These photographs here are experimental photographs by David Hare, the artist who lived here in 1940. They were experimental works that he did in the darkroom. So this is a print by the artist Susan Rothenberg. I'm not sure what you see, but it actually is a horse approaching you. Some people I've asked about it and they aren't sure what they're looking at. It looks like an abstract form, but I can sort of see the horse's head and the leg that's bent here and another leg here. But other people have seen it as just an abstract form. This is from the 1970s. So, the thing is as you grow older, 1970s is, 50 years ago. So, these things become part of history. Well, this is a 17th century. Can you believe it? 17th century. So what does that mean? It's like 500 years old? It's a gilded frame with an antique mirror in it. I just love its simplicity and the architecture and the boldness of it. I had wanted a house outside the city in New York for more than 30 years. And finally, I had the resources to pursue that dream. I ended up in Roxbury, Connecticut, based on some recommendations by friends. And on the first day out, I saw this house. It was an antique house on 8 acres of land, which I didn't fully understand at the time. But it was in this community that had a lot of antique homes, and I could afford it. And that held a lot of appeal for me. This house was built in 1840. It was built by Ezekiel Beardsley, and that's sort of what I knew about the house. There was a family who had lived here for 50 years with the last name Kuhn, K-U-H-N, and they were endeared in the community because they had lived here a long time. But about 5 years after I bought the house, I learned that there had been an artist named David Hare who lived here. People often confuse the name with an English playwright named David Hare, but this was an artist who was a sculptor and showed with the art gallery Art of this Century, which was run by Peggy Guggenheim in New York City. When I first uncovered that, I couldn't believe it. It was one, I hadn't heard of this guy, and I know a lot about art history. And so I started digging and digging and digging, and ultimately found a fascinating story that was all but disappeared. I have a long relationship with historic preservation going back probably to my high school years. And so having an antique house was really a dream come true. And as I uncovered this remarkable history of the house going back to 1840, but really this surrealist history from 1940 to 1950 and beyond, continued to do my research and found that there had been a history that had not really been revealed. Once I uncovered all of that, I got in contact with Preservation Connecticut, and with their assistance, we just recently got listed on the National Registry of Historic Places, based more on its cultural history than its architectural history. It's a perfectly charming Greek Revival farmhouse from the 19th century, but there's a lot of those in New England. But what was remarkable about this house was this rich cultural history. So now that you've seen my front parlor here, let's go into the dining room. So this table, I've sat 12 people at this table, but mostly it's 6 to 8 people. The runner that's on here is called Kuba cloth, K-U-B-A, and it's woven raffia from the country formerly known as Zaire. I love the earthiness of it and the graphic quality, and it ties in beautifully with the seagrass rug that's on the floor. The chairs are Anglo-colonial chairs. I've probably had them for 35 years, and they've served me extremely well. They've got a kind of strong graphic presence that reminds me of some of the classical elements, but also some of the rudimentary things from the African things that I own. This painting that's here is by Melinda Stickney Gibson. It's oil painting on paper. It's mysterious and deep and earthy. The chandelier in this room is something I designed for a client's breakfast room many years ago, and when they moved from their house, we were changing up their next residence, and so it came back to my house. And what the idea around this is that I wanted to design something that looked like it was from the early 20th century when electricity was a new item, where you might have used gas or you might have used electricity. And so it has lampshades on it, which gives a nice warm glow, and combined with candles on the table, it makes for a very sexy dining room. Here on this wall is a large circular work on bark cloth. It is from the island of Samoa. The thing that I like about this is it reminds me of a number of things, like in Alfred Hitchcock movies when you're having vertigo and the movie's going in and out and there's a kind of psychedelic aspect to this. I also like how it's authentically of the culture in which it came from, but I also see a kind of double read, or a third read, as it were, that it's almost like some of the things that might have been painted on the sides of barns by Amish farmers. And then, of course, it reads modern. Here's some more of my basaltware collection. And the dining room, these light fixtures that I have here are something that I designed probably 35 years ago, and they couldn't be simpler. They're just kind of a steel frame with these long bare T-bulbs that give kind of the glow of candlelight. The lamps that sit on the sideboard are something I designed over 30 years ago. These are the prototypes for a jewelry showroom. They're simple steel frames that are in a rusted finish, and with these long bare T-bulbs, which the filaments kind of wiggle, and they've got, again, that sort of ye old early electricity, but there's also a kind of modern graphic presence with the form itself. Connected to the dining room is this open living room. When you come into this room, it just really presents like a sitting room. It's got corner windows that were actually probably added in 1950 or later. And you don't really see a TV. I really don't love coming into a room and sort of seeing the TV first thing. It's kind of discreetly hidden around on the wall here. We do use this room on a regular basis for watching TV, but it's also used for reading, napping, chatting with friends. The tables in here are also designed by Rob's John Gibbings. You can see the classical form of the legs. It's a little bit leaner and a little bit more modern. These were probably designed for end tables, but I prefer them as a pair of coffee tables. They're a little bit higher. You don't have to bend over so much when you're grabbing your drink or your snacks or whatever. The artwork that's in here, this is gouache on paper by Donald Bachelor, and it was something I bought from an art dealer friend in the late 1980s when I first moved to New York City, and I paid him $100 a month for 7 months to get this work. What's interesting about this is that Donald Bachelor's work is always kind of these primitive elements, and so it says Donald, so we'll take it as a self-portrait. But beneath that, you can maybe sort of see it. There's something that they call pentimento, which is when an artist changes their mind and paints something over it later. And what the pentimento is in this case, it's actually his father. So there's something about the father-son relationship there, which I think is quite remarkable. This work over the fireplace is by an artist named Tom Friedman. It's actually a print. He did make one original of this, but it's actually dollar bills that have been cut up. And if you come in closely, you can sort of see George Washington's face here with a gazillion eyes and nose, and things like "In God We Trust" and all this around the bottom. But there's something simple and American about it. These elements here are from Africa. This is also from Zaire. This is a Katanga cross, which actually appears on their stamp and on their currency. And this is currency. Now, I know that sounds funny, but money is an abstraction. And so when I've done a reading about this, when there was a dowry, a woman might when she was going into another person's family, might come with a pile of blankets, a goat, a donkey, and a bunch of Katanga cross. And there was a kind of belief that there was value to these. I like to give these to my clients that work in finance because money is an abstraction, isn't it? And this is is a ceremonial element from Africa. This here is a drawing by an artist named David Dupuy, and you'll see that there are a number of things that that have to do with steps. He's an artist whose work I followed for quite some time. These are highly rendered on the steps. They get larger as they get to the bottom, and then there's this kind of scratchy stairs that are here. This table is it's a library table, I guess. But this becomes I like to put table desks in living rooms and find that they become a very multifunctional space. It's a great place to pull up a laptop. Sometimes my partner and I will have dinner here, just the two of us. When we're entertaining, it might be a place where we set up a self-serve bar or hors d'oeuvres. It really becomes a multifunctional element. The chairs are French 1940s. They're from a games table, but they're kind of upright armchairs, and they're quite good for working. And then the last work of art in here is this print here. This is by the artist Lucio Fontana, And one of the things that Lucio Fontana did, sometimes they talk about in theater the fourth wall, which is the wall between the actors and the audience. And in this case, what he did with paintings is he actually sliced canvases to actually pierce the picture plane. This is an addition, and probably from the 60s or 70s, but it's a print of a kind of purple lozenge-like shape, but then each of them are scored individually to scrape into the work. And again, there's a kind of minimal elegance and something that's kind of disruptive at the same time. Over here, this is I like things that are 1 foot in history and 1 foot in the times in which we live. And if you look at this table, this is actually from the 19th century. It has a kind of modern sensibility, and at the same time, it's also got a sort of antique form. So when I first bought this house, I don't think people really understood how to deal with this room. This was a dining room, but they were anxious about how it should be, and had a kind of ordinary sized table, and I decided to go bold. And I differentiated the two rooms with two matching rugs. There had been a built-in bookcase over here, a sofa with its back facing the fireplace, and it really didn't function well. There was a chair over by the corner. The colors were sort of pink and mauve and yellow, and there was an antique fireplace around, but it was ill-fitting and was not original to the house. I added the beams, and working with an architect, we developed the end wall in the living room with the fireplace. And then over here, one of the things about antique houses is that they didn't have central heating. And so somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, they added this corner window. This never would have been here, but one of the things that's great about it is that it opens up to this side yard, which is now a kind of open meadow. And we'll see when we go outside, there's this classical urn that sits in a sea of pachysandra. When I learned of this history of David Hare's existence here, I learned that there was dozens upon dozens of artists and writers, photographers, poets that came to this house. And in a way, my values are consistent with that. It's a place that I think of as the more the merrier. If somebody wants to bring a guest or bring a dog or bring a friend or bring a parent, or, I just bring it on. And the house is really at its best when there's a lot of people in it. The collection of art that I have in the house is focused on a lot of the artists who came to visit, Surrealists from the 1940s and 50s, along with contemporary art that I've collected over my adult life. And the house has both its classical underpinnings because of its antique Greek Revival bones, but also has a kind of avant-garde bohemian lifestyle that I wanted to also make room for. This house is a kind of ongoing laboratory of objects in space. I'm always rearranging, moving artwork from one place to another, adding artwork, moving other artwork into storage, editing, and it's all to keep my mind engaged with the things that I have and to tell a particular story. Once I discovered the surrealist history of this house, it became part of my mission to, as I gained more and more knowledge, was to tell the story of this house and the artists that were here. So I've focused my collecting on a lot of things, artwork by artists of that period, including Joan Miro and Dorothea Tanning and Max Ernst and Roberto Matta. Most of the things are not valuable paintings. They're prints, editions that are from that era, but for me, they hold the meaning of what those artists were doing in the 1940s. So now I want to take you into the rustic room. It's really kind of a mystery room. We're going to come this way. There's this curtain, which is an incredible antique Cézanne that hangs in front of the door. Behind the curtain is a door that goes into the rustic room. So follow me. This room, it's post and beam in terms of the construction. There's a fireplace here that a local fireplace specialist told me all the bricks are handmade, which has it be dated to an earlier time. And if you see these hand-hewn beams that are here, they really would have probably been set across at this point. Now, I'm not that tall, but people were shorter then. And so there's a notion that this would have been the living room where the eating and cooking and all of that would have been done. And then upstairs would have been a kind of attic-like space with a central chimney going through to heat that upper level. When I first came to the house, I wasn't sure what to do with this room. Eventually it's become, we'll call it the rustic room. And I brought in another sectional sofa in here, and it's really great in the winter with with this huge open fireplace with a big fire in here and drinks and snacks. I guess there's a lot of drinking and snacking that happens in this house. Some of the things that are in here worth noting, this is a 19th century stair model. This would have been something that someone that built stairs would have shown to potential clients about the way a stair would be built. I just love the curiosity and the mystery of it. Over here, this is my cat, Cuba. Cuba is named after the African cloth because of her markings. She's a dear of a cat. Hi, say hello. So this is a very relaxed room. I guess, it has a kind of bohemian vibe in here. Over here on this wall, this is I found this, I think, on eBay, and it looked like it might have been something that came from Africa, but what it is it's a sign that would be hung on your at the front of your house, probably with something down here saying honey. And what it is it's kind of made out of grass, but it's a beehive. And so it's mixed here with a couple of other things, some of which are American, some of which are African, all with a kind of hand-wrought quality to them. In the early 1940s, David Hare married a woman named Jacqueline Lamba. We'll see later his studio out in the back, and she used this room as her studio. And over here, you can see this, which is a simple kind of desk-like space. This would have been her drawing table, and this was her art studio. On the back side of this building is an open woodshed, and there's a door that's up there on the wall, which goes into an attic space that's over the proverbial woodshed. When I first moved into the house, I put a bed out here, and it only got used in the summertime because the room is not so warm. And so when I got a new sectional for the living room, I thought, let me just give it a try back here. And so, the room can accommodate, I've probably had 6 or 8 people here with a big fire and drinks spread out here. And people are always sort of amazed when they see this room because they think they've seen the finished part of the house. And you'll see that we walk through this kind of curtain, which is an antique Suzanni that brings you into this room. Sort of a hidden room. The light fixture that's in here is really coming out of the Akari light fixtures that Isamo Noguchi created to help a community in Japan after the war. So it's a giant paper shade, and it gives a kind of, and those things were in the 40s and the 50s, and so it gives a kind of retro bohemian quality, but also gives a nice quality of light in the room. Let me take you outside so you can see the side yard. This amazing classical urn came with the house. I guess it's too big to move, and I'm really grateful that I've got it. This area here, which is a sea of Pachysandra, I discovered that underneath it was a red brick herringbone patio, but the Pachysandra took over, and now it's just going to remain Pachysandra. and it's raised up and overlooks this meadow area, which we've let go just wild. And then back over there on the side yard, there's a hammock that sits under the tree. And this is probably a 100-year-old sugar maple. You're seeing it now at the end of the season with very few leaves left on it, but it's a magnificent, magnificent tree. I've collected things for a very long time, whether it's furniture, artwork, objects, friends, and I tend to keep things for a long period of time in all that category. So some of the artwork that I have a painting in the living room. It's a gouache on paper that I bought 40 years ago, when it was the first work of art I bought in New York, and I paid $100 a month until I paid off the $700. It's very important to me because it was at a point when I was just moving to New York, and the fact that I could have real artwork in my home always made a huge difference to me. While the house has 4 bedrooms, 3 of which are sort of smallish, and it's not that big. It's like 2,300 square feet, but somehow the way in which it's been built, it rambles a bit. And this step down into the rustic room is really part of that. Now what I'd like to do is take you into a little room that I call the research lab. So come with me. I heard from some people that grew up here that their mother had used this as a sewing room. I wasn't sure exactly what to do with it, but as I started getting down the path of doing research on the history of the house, it became the repository and really my research lab. What you see here is, I don't know, I probably got about 7.5 feet of books about the various people and artists that came through this house. It started with the artist David Hare, and this is a catalog from an exhibition. And this sculpture that's on the front of the catalog, we'll see in the studio later, was actually made out in the studio building. And this is a catalog of his works going into the 70s. At some point, he had a one-person show at the Guggenheim Museum. And then this is his second wife named Jacqueline Lamba, who was a French artist. So it's a really kind of amazing and somewhat complex story, but I'll try and give you the abbreviated version of it. So David Hare grew up on Long Island in a fairly well-to-do family, and early on he got married to another well-to-do family, and they were married at the Metropolitan Club. Her mother, I think, was in the administration of FDR. They were involved in the arts, but at a certain point, David Hare fell for Jacqueline Lamba. Jacqueline Lamba was escaping Europe because of the oppression of the approaching war from the Germans, and she came here with her husband, André Breton, who's the elder statesman, really, of Surrealism in France. There's a photograph of them here standing at the front door with their daughter Aube, who's now, I think, 87, living in the south of France, and a woman named Dolores Vanetti, and Dolores Vanetti's young husband, a handsome young doctor. David Hare built the studio in around 1940 and worked out in the back. Eventually, when he married Jacqueline Lamba, she moved in and took over the rustic room as the studio. And some of the photos I've got here are from this legacy. As it started to reveal itself, I really couldn't believe how it interfaced with history. So one of the things that happened is that André Breton and Jacqueline Lamba went to Mexico to visit Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, where she interfaced with Leon Trotsky. There, artists of that era, like artists of this era, were more forward-thinking, and the boundaries between propriety and not were dissolved. And as documented in a book here called The Militant Muse, this is Jacqueline Lamba and Frida Kahlo, and apparently when Jacqueline spent about a year there, and they were an item. Now, 1940 was a long time ago, so that would have been a pretty edgy thing. And they continued to be friends for a long time. Nearby, David Hare's cousin, whose name was Kay Sage, a female artist who I'd never really heard of before, but she was married to a French surrealist named Yves Tanguy. Well, they too left Europe to come to the United States, and they lived about 10 miles away. And there's a photograph here of Yves Tanguy, Kay Sage, Maria Martins, who was Marcel Duchamp's girlfriend, Marcel Duchamp, Enrico Donati, and Friedrich Kiesler. And Friedrich Kiesler was an Austrian architect who designed Peggy Guggenheim's gallery, Art of the Century. As time went on, both Jacqueline and David Hare, they were very open with their house, I guess in a similar way that I am. And I started to understand how many people that are bold-faced names in modern art history came through this house. And it includes Joan Miro, Marcel Duchamp, Jackson Pollock, Robert Motherwell, Roberto Matta, William Baziodes, Jimmy Ernst, Philip Guston, Andre Masson, Stanley William Hayter, Walt Kuhn, Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning. And so what I've got here on this wall is pictures of the people that came to visit this house. And so I think it was probably a simple house, but it was an open house and people liked to come here. At one point in January 1945, David and Jacqueline, I think, went to Arizona for 9 months. And during that time period, they loaned the house to Arshil Gorky. When I first found this out, I couldn't believe it. I said, this is crazy. And so Arshil Gorky lived in this house for 9 months, from January to September 1945. And many of the, there are many books on Arshil Gorky, and I've been able to trace artworks that would have been created out in the studio building. The other thing that's of interest is that, and maybe one of the reasons why people came to this area in particular, because it was pretty rural. At the time, Roxbury had only 800 people, and it's the size of Manhattan. Today, there's 2,200 people in Roxbury, so it's really a bustling metropolis compared to the 1940s. But in the same footprint, there's 1.6 million people living in Manhattan. So this is a book on Calder at home, and there's quite a few images of his home and studio, which is about 1.5 miles from here. And he became a very good friend with Jacqueline and David Hare. And this was before he became a big deal and started doing big corporate sculptures and things like that. He was living quite modestly, and his studio was really kind of utter chaos. It actually, when I saw pictures of his studio, I started to admire him much more as an artist. There's a picture of Alexander Calder sitting at a picnic table on the side yard, which I will show to you. This is a book that was on Yves Tanguy and Calder. It's called Between Surrealism and Abstraction. And when Peggy Guggenheim opened her gallery, she had one side was for surrealism and the other side was for abstraction. And she wore one earring by Alexander Calder and one earring by Yves Tanguy to show her impartiality between surrealism and abstraction. And so this book is showing some of the correlations between their work at that time. So it's really been a remarkable adventure to revisit art history through the filter of this particular 10-year period. Enough about art history. Let's go into the kitchen and see what goes on there. So this was probably the original kitchen, and I think where the refrigerator is, believe it or not, in this sort of modest scale house, there was a back stair that came down there. So if that was circulation and all these doors, I don't know how they actually had room for appliances, but this was the kitchen. I learned that in the original house, there was a stair that came right down here and it would have a small little back stair. The house isn't that big, but there was a back stair that came down here. So with this being circulation, I don't know where they put all the appliances, but it's not a big kitchen, but it's very efficient. And we do a lot of, as I've mentioned before, we do a lot of entertaining. And I don't like to serve family style. I prefer to serve things plated. And so we lay out all the plates and serve it up and then serve it into our guests. Now, a lot of people would use a pantry. The pantry was here. A lot of people would use a pantry to store food, but because we do so much entertaining, it's really more about the dishes and serving pieces that we need to make for a great dinner party. The artwork in this room, this is a original work by Alfred Jensen from the early 1960s. Alfred Jensen created a kind of whole cosmology of the order of the universe that had something to do with mathematics, and I couldn't really explain it to you. But this is a kind of study piece that he did. Over here is this is a 19th century game board that has its own numbers and grid similar to the Alfred Jensen. And this is, I've mounted it on the wall, and this would have been where the games pieces are. And this sits here. And then there's another Alfred Jensen print that's on the wall. On this wall over here, I call it my 19th century Donald Judd. And for people that know art, they look at me and they look a little cross-eyed, and they can't quite figure it out because Donald Judd didn't start making his works until the 1960s. So this, in fact, would have been a carpenter-made small shelf. Maybe it was for herbs or I'm not sure what, but there's a certain kind of modern graphic quality through a kind of rustic point of view that I love with that work. The breakfast room was added probably in the 60s or the 70s, and it steps down, and there's a banquette here, and sometimes we have 4 or 5 people here. And the most extraordinary thing, well, we've got this monstera. It keeps getting bigger and bigger, and these are the air roots. Now I keep the air roots kind of like bangs. I keep them clipped so that they don't quite hit the floor. So it's got its own kind of graphic quality. And then there's this light fixture. During COVID, the senior designer in my office found this on, I think it was on eBay, and I ordered it. It's from Czechoslovakia. It's from the 70s. It's this incredible blown glass with this kind of brawny metalwork to it, and it came, and it was in one piece. It didn't break. It's an odd thing. It's a bit, I guess, a lantern-like, but it makes a statement quietly. So let's go upstairs and I'll show you a couple of the bedrooms. This is the landing. What's worth noting here is this is an artwork from the early 1970s by David Hare. This is an arts and crafts table that I got at a yard sale, and I'm not sure what this crazy vase is, but I found this vine out on the property, and somehow it sort of makes a thing here going on. There's another cotton rug in here, and this is another rug that I designed. And you can see that the palette in here is kind of, I've got a warm white, almost to yellow on the walls, and kind of a green-gray that kind of wraps through the whole house. Let's go in here. This is the primary bedroom. It's an unusual space. I think the ceilings are less than 7 feet, maybe they're 7 feet, and it's sort of like a tent. The walls start at, I guess, around 5 feet. And normally when you hang artwork, it's hung at sort of 5 feet, 60 inches to the center. This room came with this antique toile wallpaper already on the wall, which wasn't really the thing that I would imagine putting in here, but I kept it. People would come in and they go, this is so great. And I, tried to make sense of it and tried to make sense of it. And then as I started going down this path of surrealism, I found some inspiration from Peggy Guggenheim. In her gallery, Art of this Century, she had one gallery that was devoted to surrealism. And the artwork was projected from the walls on curved walls, and there was a lot of it of various sizes. And so what I did is I took that idea and hung artwork basically at the eye level of when you're in bed. So there's, I don't know how many works are in here, 30, 40, something like that. Some of them are surrealist works from the period. This is André Masson, and this is Hans Bellmer. These works down here, this is by Jacqueline Lamba and David Hare, but it's also combined with more contemporary things. This is a print by Richard Tuttle, and this is a drawing by Leon Golub. Like those windows that we saw downstairs, these must have been added in the around the same time. They're curious casement-style windows that open out, and it looks out into the side yard, into that giant sugar maple that I showed you before. Over the bed, this is an abstract work by Jean Dubuffet from 1958. There's another experimental photograph over here by David Hare. Down here, he did a lot of manipulations in the darkroom. This is by Alphonse Osorio, who was very good friends with Jackson Pollock. And this is by André Masson, who lived in New Preston. This is from the Guggen Institute, which is an institute that started in the 1920s for neurodivergent artists. The furniture in here, like downstairs, this is also Rob's John Gibbings. This is in blonde wood, and you can see, again, those tapered columns, and so too is this Klizmo stool. Even in the winter, we tend to turn the heat very low and open up the windows to look out into the tree, and it's like being in a tree house. Over here, there's an artwork by Feliciano Behar. It's a little bit like the center of the dollar bill that we saw in the living room. He used automobile parts for the framework and then took ground glass and created these kind of specular glass elements that abstract things in the world. This is another work by André Masson. This is a press photo of an explosion in space, and this is by Dorothea Tanning. She was ultimately married to Max Ernst, someone I met some 20 years ago. And so you can see that there's a lot of information in here, but it's a very calming space and really spectacular for sleeping. Saturday nights are the main event here. We tend to come up on Friday nights. Saturday we do our local shopping with Green Market and local farms. I love to plan ways to include friends and family in the house. So oftentimes I'll have people coming up for the weekend weeks and sometimes months in advance because coordinating people's schedules. When I went shopping for a house, I really didn't have an agenda on the number of bedrooms, but they're not big rooms, particularly big bedrooms, but I've got 4 bedrooms in the house, and at one point there was a 5th room. So at one point I had 5 beds in the house, and so there were times where the house was very full, the table was very full, the pool was full, and it made for joyful weekends. A typical evening on Saturday starts at 6:30 or 7 for drinks, and then there's snacks, and then ultimately we end up sitting at the table for hours, eating, drinking, laughing, and just acting ridiculous. I think this coming weekend we're going to have 8 people for dinner. I have a guest who's coming who loves to cook, and he's already planning the meal. And so I'm gathering friends to fill up the table and have a fun evening. So now we're in the backyard, and I have to tell you, the backyard is really big. The property is more than 8 acres. It's very wide and extremely deep. And one of the things that came with the house was a swimming pool, this building out here, which we'll visit, and 2 other small barns here. I can't believe that all this came with this super cool house. I never imagined that I would have a swimming pool. It just wasn't on my list of things that I thought I would have. But lo and behold, I end up with a swimming pool. It's late in the season. I just don't like to close it up. It looks so beautiful the way it reflects the colors from the trees, and so here we are. I mean, it's kind of a cement pond, like the Beverly Hillbillies. I really don't like having a big patio around it. I did put a patio for some chaises over there, but I love it being almost like a reflecting pool. I've got gates that face the house and then out to the back. I've got 4 sets of gates, and it just keeps the whole area very open. I'm set up with 6 chaises here, and they look across to what had been David Hare's studio. Over time, it's really become called the Pleasure Pavilion. I probably should call it the studio, but we call it the Pleasure Pavilion, and now everybody just calls it the Pleasure Pavilion. When I first came to see the house, the realtors, I said, "What is that building?" And she said, "Oh, it's a wood shop." There was like 15 inches of snow on the ground when I came to look at the house, and the realtor couldn't be bothered to come out to see the building. So I came out here with my daughter, and when we go inside, you'll see it's a spectacular space. When I saw the house, it was winter, so there were no leaves on any of the trees. And then when I closed on the house and came back in May, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. Where this fence is, which is a fence that I put in, was where the beginning of the forest was, and you couldn't see anything. And so over the more than 10 years I've been here, I've taken down many trees to kind of open it up and have it feel more like it's agrarian. So let's go take a look at the Pleasure Pavilion. So this building was built probably around 1940 by David Hare for himself. I think at that time he was doing photography, and then shortly thereafter started doing sculpture. It didn't quite look like this. The building was here, but I've since added a lot of windows and doors to open it up to the outside. And I guess once you get inside, you'll see why it's no longer called just a studio. So let's go in and take a look. So this had been built by David Hare as his studio. There was a big window here that faced really to the east, not the normal to the north as many artists do. And this was the end of the room where he sort of did his primary work. That end of the building was kind of a dark room and a bathroom. And I've opened up the whole thing. It was I rebuilt the roof and added a lot of windows in here. And it's now set up for whatever floats your boat. I think this weekend we're going to have a dinner party for 8 out here. I think the ceilings in here go up to like 16 feet, and it's 600 square feet of just open space. So aside from this big 60-inch round, this could also be additional sleeping. This is essentially two twin beds that are put together, and this looks out to the woods in the back. This is an abstract painting. I don't really know. It's someone, W.K. Chow from 1964, but it helps give the notion of the artist studio in here. And then over here, this is another reproduction of a work that I know to have been made in this building by Arshil Gorky. And this is, I think, called Good Hope Road 1. And I believe it's in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. This chair over here is a carved wood Syrian chair. And this is this kind of dramatic, sawtooth lamp. I look forward to having some fall parties in here for drinks, and maybe I can get my friends to dance. I like to do a lot of candlelight out here, but it's a magnificent space. And then behind the screen, I'll show you, it's a gym. So not too fancy, but there's a lot of free weights and a BOSU and an exercise ball and various other things. And so it becomes a multi-use space. We have done yoga classes out here. I could set up for theater. So I'm looking to expand further the opportunities in the Pleasure Pavilion. When I first moved to New York 40 years ago, I moved into the center of Soho, Spring Street and West Broadway, at a time when it was the epicenter of contemporary art. And even at that point, my fascination with New York City, I still was dreaming of a place outside the city so that I could go barefoot in the grass. I'm not, it wasn't something that I grew up with. I grew up in a suburb, but there was something about having the yin to the yang or whatever that seemed very appealing. It took a very long time, more than 30 years for me to get this property, but I had the aspiration of finding a balance to urban living. I've always lived in historic districts, curiously enough. When I first moved to New York, I was in Soho, then I lived in the Village, and then I've been living in Brooklyn Heights, which in fact is the first historic district in the city of New York. And given my interest in historic preservation, finding an antique house was really something special. And so getting this listing on this house with the National Registry of Historic Places marks my territory as in this historic house. What you don't get in the city is moments of real repose and noticing the changing of the light. We're here in sort of early autumn, but the property and the house are beautiful all year round. And I do come up probably 49 of 52 weeks of the year. I do come up to the house, and it's always beautiful. It's different, but it's always beautiful. And in that way, it's kind of like the wind can blow through your brain in a different way, and it gives you some objectivity on the life in the city. Homeworthy, thanks for coming to see my antique house in Roxbury, Connecticut. I've really enjoyed sharing it with you, but now it's time for you guys to go. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.